Hey guys, I'm Nakar Grattagliano, host of Shogun Valley, and today our guest is Lorenzo. He currently lives in Japan and he has an interesting story to share with us. Hey Lorenzo, how you doing?
Hi, my name is Lawrence, though. Lawrence.
Lawrence, I'm sorry. I am from Italy, so I tend to change names all the time. So Lawrence, how was your experience so far in Japan? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, Japan overall has been pretty good to me. I mean, obviously there's good and bad. I think people kind of get um, they have this like misconstrued view of Japan where they think that Japan is this utopia where you can have I don't know where it's all good and there's no bad or anything over here as opposed to other countries. But there's ups and downs, especially living here as a foreigner that you'll go through. But for me overall, I think Japan has been pretty good.
So, Lawrence, tell me a little bit about your journey. How you started in America? I mean, what were you doing before? When did this choice start to turn in your mind? You just
Uh, so I kind of knew from a younger age that I was gonna end up here. Um, so so what really originally drew me to Japan were as growing up I was always into cars. I used to love, well, I still do, but I used to really love cars growing up. And like I would play video games like Gran Turismo and Need for Speed and stuff like that. And as I got older, um, I kind of started to realize that most of the cars in the games were Japanese cars and stuff like that. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole of, customizing cars and, being really heavily into the car culture. And but what really sold me on Japan was in high school, maybe like my sophomore year in high school. I started watching these Japanese um, car videos. There's like a car, like Japan has like this car magazine they used to, where they would like showcase the cars and like have these events and blah blah blah. And so I tried to learn how to speak Japanese from those videos, but I didn't know how to teach myself a language. So I started trying to teach myself how to speak Japanese. And from there, like I started to research other parts of the culture and other aspects of Japan on the internet. This is probably like 2009, 2010-ish, that I'm doing all this. And so I was also at the time in high school, I was a s- I was a sought after college athlete. So I had scholarship offers from different colleges for wrestling. And I kind of knew when I went to college that I wanted to learn Japanese and pursue a life in Japan from the time I was in high school. So I negotiated some terms in my scouting trips for college, and I ended up in a school in North Carolina, and I was studying Japanese. And then from there I went and studied abroad. And then from after study abroad I came back and graduated from college. And then I ended up working in America for about 5 years after I graduated. So I started doing like physical manual labor with like in like maybe like a basically like a construction job. And then from there I went into IT with my degree, and I was doing like import export stuff for I worked for Dell, or I worked for EMC, which was later bought by Dell. And then I worked for another company after that, because after that merger, after Dell bought EMC, I ended up having to leave because they did downsizing or whatever. And so then I went to another company called Fidelity, and I
so
worked there.
did you go to Japan and you already had a job, or you just went and you kind of looked around and you found a job on the spot?
From so after I studied abroad, or
No, just after your whole experience working with Dell and working for various companies in America, did you just jump on a plane, got on spot, and found a job in Japan, or you got a job in the United States and then eventually moved?
it was kind of both actually. So when I was the entire time that I was working in America, I was still looking for jobs in Japan. So I was applying to jobs actively. And eventually somebody I made relations with one of the people that I met while I was studying abroad the first time, which was in Fukuoka. So my original plan was to go back to Fukuoka and work after, like, directly after graduating from college. I wanted to go right back, but I ended up staying because life happens. My grandmother got really sick, and some other things happened, and but I was actively applying to jobs the entire time, and eventually I kind of linked up with a company, and I ended up in Tochigi.
So that was for you. So it was a long time coming, and you kind of, as soon as you got there, you kind of fulfilled a long, lifelong dream, I guess. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was something I knew I wanted to do for a long time.
So I hear there's all these different food in Japan that we don't have here in the West, especially in Italy. And
Mhm.
so, what is your favorite Japanese food?
Favorite Japanese food? Japanese food, probably okonomiyaki is my favorite Japanese food. So it's like a Japanese pancake. So they have I don't even know everything that's in it, but it has like every area has a different style. So like they have like cabbage and then like the pancake batter, and then they have like this sauce that they put over it. And sometimes they put like meat or like seafood in it. It's pretty good. I like eating that a lot.
So, as we all know, worldwide, there's been a lot of protesting going on, especially done by the Black Lives Matter movement. After it was triggered after the death of Mr. George Floyd, the killing of Mr. George Floyd. From the perspective of an Afro-American who is living in Japan, what's your take on that?
My take on it as far as what the protest.
As far as how you feel as a American living abroad, and if you want to share, maybe you have some feelings you want to share about the story and all of this, what's going on with racism in America and protesting, and maybe you can compare it to the way you feel as living abroad, living in Japan, versus how would you feel? How do you think you would feel if you were living just now in America? So I mean,
Um, well, so when the protest started, um, I was very pessimistic about them because um, after George Floyd was murdered, lynched in the street, we'll say he was lynched. Um, people, there was like a few days before people started protesting, and so um, what it reminded me of the first day was in Baltimore when I forget his name. There was a situation similar to Baltimore where a young African American man was killed, and they started looting the streets, but they were just looting all kinds of shit for no reason, like just stuff that was not going to help make a difference or bring justice to the man who lost his life. Um, and then they started the the uh, the riots started to change, so then they burned down the police station and they started rioting and stuff like that. So at the beginning, um, I was very pessimistic towards it. I didn't think that it was necessary. And then I started seeing more of the peaceful protests. And I'm never happy to see a black man killed by the cops, but growing up in America, like this is as a black man growing up from America, this is a reality, and you kind of get after a certain point, you're kind of numb to it. It still hurts every time you see it, but it's like with every new case, it's not really a surprise. Like you don't really expect it, but you're not surprised by it because it happens so much. So like it's like the anger starts, it turns into sadness, and then it just turns into like numbness because we're not really powerless, but um we don't have the, what's the word I'm looking for, like we don't have the power to really do anything right now because we don't own anything. um so like my turning point as far as looking from Japan to America, at first, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really interested, but like the more I started to pay attention and look at what people were doing and trying and what they were trying to accomplish as far as justice, the more I wanted to jump on board. And at one point, I thought about flying back just so I could protest because I was so moved by the country standing together in solidarity, that I actually did contemplate going back, but then I wouldn't be able to get back if I did that.
Well, um, personally, I was shocked, very, very shocked by the video. I watched it only once. I haven't watched it since. I think it was very disturbing. Total lack of empathy. So I just took it once. I'm just gonna need to. It's just too much. And but I heard there's been a lot of support going on, including in Asia, including in Japan. There's been some Black Lives Matter that have organized some things. For the part of Italy, there's been there's been some protesting going on here too, especially in Rome and other cities, including in the city where I'm based now. And so I've seen a lot of support worldwide, in Australia and for all over. I see people that are white and black and from all races that are just kind of protesting and had enough. That I think it's for me. I believe it's a positive sign. However, yeah, but I believe anyway that the experience you as an Afro-American and growing up in America, the experience you have of being black versus someone like me who grew up mostly in Europe, is slightly different. Although there is racism also here, it's not as it is not as maybe vicious or maybe hard as in America. So it's another type of racism.
Well, I don't want to compare racism because racism is just it's racism. It's a
Yeah,
problem worldwide, right?
it
So
is. It is. I'm sorry. Yeah.
so it's not really, yeah, it's really bad in America, but in places I don't really know that much about Italy. Like I have an Italian friend. He's told me that it can get pretty bad there, especially like with he said like immigrants from African countries, they try to come into Italy and they have like guns and like shoot the boats away from the land and
Yeah,
stuff
it,
like
it
that.
gets it gets pretty bad. I think I kind of laugh, but it's not to get dramatic because it's very sad what
Mm.
happens here. It's very sad and yeah, it's horrible. So also because Italy we have especially there's great culture, great value. It's a land of many great artists and intellectuals, and I think all over the world they study Italy.
Mm.
In every school in the world, whether it's Galileo or Michelangelo or some other figure you have heard about. But however, there is this dark legacy of fascism, and some people they're really attracted to this legacy of fascism, and so you have some movements that are quite radical, and at times they go in government and they are yeah, that's pretty sad. Uh, Let's forget that. Um, so, how do you feel living in Japan as a black man, or in general as a foreigner? And how it's your sensation? Um, yeah.
Mm, Um, so I think every black person in well just say Japan, I think everyone's experience is different. Okay, so
Okay.
like for example, a lot of people, you know, they have issues with Japanese people. Every foreigner has issues with Japanese people. I don't care what they say. Okay, because
Okay, so
there's
every
two different
foreigner, no
cultures.
matter from what color or where they come from, they have some sort of, you know, this
Yeah,
other culture. So it's easy to have something that you don't agree with. Okay.
yeah. There's I'm trying to think of some things that are like, you know, that only apply to black people as far as
Or even if it's
interactions.
something that only apply to you, because we're really talking, Lawrence, about your individual experience. So I don't feel like
Mm.
putting you in a position where you speak for all black people. You're just speaking your personal experience. What is it you experienced that you know, may be of value for someone else? You know.
I mean, I don't know that so like I can do both, right? So like there are things that I think are just subject to me that could apply to just the fact that I'm black in Japan. Like there's people that say, "Oh, well, Japanese people don't like sitting next to me on the train," but for me it's the exact opposite. They come and sit right fucking next to me, and a lot of times I don't want them to sit next to me, but it's the exact opposite. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like there's people that complain about that, or there's people that complain about Japanese people not coming up to talk to them. And Japanese people, for some reason, they always come up and talk to me like when I don't want to talk to them. So it's like there's different things. I think for me though, um, I would say they prejudge how well I can speak Japanese sometimes. Like I'll come up to them and like if I have a question about something, I'll speak to them in like fluent Japanese, and they feel the need to try and respond to me in English for some reason and make things extremely awkward and difficult. Like that's one thing that might be subject to me. And like, at first I thought it was just, I've asked people about this and they say, oh yeah, they do that, but then like all my friends, they'll do the same thing and then they get an answer in Japanese. So I'm like, okay, well maybe it's just me. So I think it's kind of hard to gauge what is actually happening to just you or what's happening to all foreigners sometimes.
Okay.
Is kind of
And
what I'm saying.
what is the best, the thing you love the most about Japan?
Um, the thing I love the most about Japan, um, Japan, is really kind of reconnected me to, it's kind of really reconnected me to like my childhood loves. So things that I gave up in my adolescence as like a teenager because of outside influences telling me, oh, that's no good. Like like right before I came back to Japan, I started drawing again, which is something before I left I hadn't done in like 12 years. I hadn't drawn in forever because my immediate family made it seem like I wasn't going to be able to be lucrative or be a productive person if I was drawing all the time. They made it very cut and dry, where I had to sever some of these things that subconsciously were making me very happy, not even realizing it, and focus on a college degree or getting a good job and stuff like that. So being in Japan is kind of afforded me the ability to kind of reconnect with some of those things that I really enjoyed and were actually kind of connected to my overall existence as a person in general. So I'll always appreciate Japan for that. Um, so yeah, like drawing, I can go outside and see all the cars that I looked at on YouTube all the time. I can walk up the street and outside of people like talking to you or like asking you for money sometimes. Um, I can carry out a normal life, which is really nice. There's
So
not.
I've heard that because you have curly hair in Japan, that you have people sometimes that try to put their hands in your hair. Did that happen to you? Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a funny story about that. So I live in Tokyo now. So last year I lived in Saitama, and I was working, so I think I was coming home from work one day. And I was tired. I remember like being really tired, and I used to live in this town that was like just old Japanese people mainly, and then like young kids, maybe like 7 or 8. Because there was like a school right next to my apartment, but there was like this long walk from the train station to my apartment. And so I'm walking one day, and I always walk this way. Like nobody's ever harassed me up to this day. And so I'm walking, and there's this older gentleman, and he's got like a cane, and he's walking like really slow, like he looked very uncomfortable. And he stopped me. He was like, "Hey, wait, can you stop for a second?" I was like, so I'm thinking he needs help. I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" And then I thought maybe he needed some money, or he needed help or walking somewhere. And this dude stops me. He's like, "Can I touch your hair? Because it's so curly." I was like, "Bro, no, I'm leaving." And I walked away because I was just like so upset.
Yeah, I used to get that too, but it's here in Italy, so it's the same. I think when you look different, they will just try to. Yeah, it's something about our hair that just people want to stick their finger in it. Yeah, kind
Yeah.
of. But for
But
me, it used to happen more when I was a kid, when I was smaller.
mm.
Now it's kind of
So
maybe.
like the kids still do it. The kids don't even ask. They just kind of take your hair. They just put their hand in your head and stuff like that.
Mm.
But the adults, uh, normally the older ladies that ask, but this time it was just some dude.
So, for someone who was planning to come in Japan, what would be the best piece of advice you would give?
Um, I would say, mm, if you're planning on come here, I would say, do your research about as much as you can. I would find like Reddit forums. I would find any information I could find. I would, talk to people like this, just to get as much information, because I think a lot of people they move here, especially now. Well, not like before COVID, like when people were moving here. They come here, like I said, with this misconstrued conception of how Japan operates and what Japan actually is. Like, yeah, there's a lot of flashing lights and nice buildings, and there's uh nomi hodai and all this other stuff, but there's also a dark side to Japan. There's other things that they don't tell you about in the media, that if you're not prepared for, it might hit you by surprise, and it could change your overall perspective of Japan for the worse. And I think that happens to a lot of foreigners.
So, what
So
what would be that dark side to Japan that you see from your experience that you have witnessed, that the part they don't actually tell you about?
I mean, it's especially Tokyo. Tokyo's, it's hard living out here. Like, it's you can have a, you can there's different aspects to it. Like you can just work a straight job, but I think some people come out here thinking that um you're just gonna be all play and no work, and like you have to work, like you have to hustle if you want to live here. And like if you come out here thinking that it's gonna be that way, you might be severely disappointed. Um, Another thing I've seen recently is like, a lot of people they talk about the safety. Um, and the safety, yeah, Japan, it's a fairly safe place. I'm not gonna downplay and act like it's not, but the reason I think that a lot of like black people say that it's safe is because they're coming from a place where war is been waged on them from their home country. Like there's already a really high negative connotation in their home country when it comes to black people. So when you come here, it's not as like in your face. Like racism does exist in Japan, don't get me wrong, but it's not as uh like overt. It's not as obvious. So it's a lot easier to go and move around or move through Japan without even really paying attention to it if you really wanted to. But it does exist, and the more you talk about it, to people, and the more Japanese you learn, the more racist you actually understand Japan is. So, you know, there's another one because some people think, oh yeah, they love anime and stuff like that, which is true, but you know, there's a lot of working people here that have their own opinions of of foreigners. Another thing is the law. You have to understand how the law works. I think a lot of people come to foreign countries in general and they don't research how the law works in the country that they're in, and they just think that they can do things the way that they did in their home country, and it could be completely different. Like there's Japan's law system is very uh we'll say outdated. It's not, there's certain things in their law that um compared to America is completely different that you have to be aware of. So you have to, you know, if you're planning, this is if you're planning on living here, if that's your goal is to live here. Like if you're just visiting, you don't have to go as in depth, but
So would you recommend for someone who's, after he's done his research, who's planning to live there, to go first just for a trip, just to look around, just maybe for a holiday, just to understand the culture before to settling in? Would you recommend a holiday trip or a few months
uh
just to get an idea?
yeah, I would definitely say, like if I were to do things over, um I would probably go to the place that I was planning on living. So for example, if I wanted to live in Tokyo, I would just take like a 2 3 week trip and just go around and start talking to people and ask them, find people that live here and start talking to them. What's it like living here? Ask them for advice. That's normally the best way to do it because in the process you'll network with people, you'll have a support group before you get here. You'll know where to look for things. You'll be a little bit more familiar with the area, and maybe your nerves about the decision will go down as well too. So that would be a good way if you could afford it. The problem is I don't know that many people that can afford to take a trip here and then they're gonna move. Normally, it's like a decision that's like, you know, I'm just gonna move there because I want to leave my current situation, which is not the answer.
So is it, so where do you live now, and is it expensive in terms of living there, or moving in the metro, moving with the bus? I don't know, buying a car, renting a car, moving around, food, drinks. Is Japan an expensive country, or you can find good bargains for live there? And how is the work job situation? I mean, it is easy to find job if you have some skills to give, or you know, because if people are to move there, they're going to have to work, right? So how is the job situation, and what are the skills on demand, and how is it on the ground, please?
What was the last part you said?
What are some of the skills that are you know demanded that you can find a job with? So that you believe are of value for Japan. If someone were to come there as a person who lives there, what would you say that something that Japanese people actually don't have that may be in high demand down there? What would someone have to bring in terms of skill set, in terms of to actually make it
Um,
down there?
well, I'll start from the beginning. So I live in a part of Tokyo called Itabashi, which is it's fairly close to Toshima or Ikebukuro. And Itabashi is not, it's not extremely expensive, but I think for the most part, like most districts in Tokyo are gonna be, as far as apartment goes, compared to where I was living in like Tochigi, for example. Like when I lived in Tochigi, my rent was maybe $400 US a month. But in Itabashi, like my rent is probably, because I'm actually in transition right now. I'm living in a share house that I'm gonna move into apartment at the end of the year, hopefully. So, but the apartments that I've been looking for in this area are about like $800 to $900 a month in Itabashi, and that's fairly normal for an apartment in Tokyo, close to the city. Um, as far as like transportation, you don't need a car because there's so many trains that run in Tokyo, especially in the metropolitan part, like Shinjuku area. There's a lot of trains, and they're not that expensive. And they have like passes that you can pay one time for the month, and then or two or one time for 3 months. They have like different prices and stuff like that, which will help um kind of like keep the cost low.
So,
Because I
sorry,
used to.
let's just do one small focus. For $400, you're getting some shared apartment, so a shared place. You may have a room. What is it you have? And the apartment you want to have, what is it they have inside? One room, two rooms for this price, just to understand exactly what you get, more or less, for this price range in terms of housing.
So apartments in Tokyo are not very big. There are cheap apartments, right? But they're like, I don't know, like 6 meters or 8 meters, not very big. Like for the whole apartment. So you have like a room, some have like a small kitchen, and then like a sink and a shower, and that's it. Like you don't have some don't even have a watch. Some have washers and dryers, some don't. They normally will tell you what the floor plan is, but like for example, my friend, he lives like 10 minutes from me in Itabashi, and he's got a bigger apartment, but he pays like almost $1,000 a month, and he has one room, the washing area, and then a kitchen, which is like it's pretty small, and then just a shower. That's normally how Japanese apartments are for one bedroom. Um, they do have like 2 bedroom apartments as well and 3 bedrooms, but normally those are like really expensive. So if you were coming here by yourself, you probably would just want like a one room apartment with a kitchen, and it would be, I'll say, anywhere from seven to like $1,000 a month in Tokyo, like in the city.
I get it. I understand. So, as for transportation, we said it is not very expensive. What regard the job part? I mean, if you are to find a job there or look for a job or even start a business, how is all that part? How does that all part work for a foreigner from the foreigner perspective?
Uh, so so you can find a job in Japan as a foreigner. So obviously they still are actively looking for English teachers, and like if you just need a job, you can easily find a job as an English teacher. Another one that I've seen is like at restaurants they have a lot of jobs for foreigners, and you actually have a lot of foreigners coming over and working in restaurants or the hospitality industry. Um, let's see. Uh, if you were to come over with skills, I know they normally are looking for like engineers or like IT personnel to do uh like UI and like system engineers and stuff like that. If you can do coding or C++, they normally have jobs, I believe, for those people, and they get paid really well. You could also be a recruiter. So the recruiters are the ones that they basically they are like liaisons for another company, and they look for people that are qualified to do the job that the company is hiring for. And with that, those jobs are kind of, I don't know, those jobs are weird. They're very commission based. So like you're a headhunter basically. You're looking for people to fill a position, and if you do, you get paid a commission. If you don't, after a few months, you might not lose your job if you're not doing too well. So as far as like stability goes, the most stable job if you don't have any skills other than speaking English is an English teacher. And you could make a lot of money doing that.
So, what about your coverage? Because, well, of course, you come from America where you have no insurance to begin with. I mean, unless you're insured, you don't have a medical service. Fortunately, in Italy, everyone gets some sort of medicine, no matter who you are, whether you are rich or poor. Of course, there is a queue. You have to stay in line. If you have, unless it's an emergency, you have to book, and maybe you have to book 3 to 6 months in advance. but it's a system that has its problem, the medical system, but it works pretty well and it's available for everyone. And it's based on your income. So based on how much money you have on the bank, you're going to get the same treatment. But if you have more money, you will pay a ticket. Otherwise, you won't. So that's pretty fair. So we have a good medical system and a lot of good doctors in Italy. So that's one thing that works. For those who don't know, how is the situation in Japan? I mean, if you are working and you just have, let's say you are a waiter, you're working as an injury, a plate fall down and you cut your hand, you have a small injury. How does that work? As a foreigner, do you have insurance? What happens if you lose your job? I mean, is it easy to find immediately? Is there a social mobility? You can find immediately another job? Or what if it takes 1 month or 2 months to find a job? Do you have some sort of insurances, coverage? I mean, how do you handle if ever if those situations happen, being there maybe alone? How do you handle those situations?
So I'm not an expert at that, but from my personal experience, so everybody in Japan has health insurance. So your job, if you only work part-time, so that's one thing about teaching English is if you're not registered as a full-time worker, then they're not obligated to give you um they're not obligated to pay for your health insurance. But everybody gets health insurance. So you either have health insurance through your company or you have health insurance through the government. If you have health insurance through the government, you just pay it like you normally would. The first year is really cheap, but then I guess it kind of is calculated based on your income, but it's more based off of your age. So the older you get, the more expensive your health insurance gets. Um, you also have a pension, which is based on your income. So depending on how much money you make, then you have to pay a certain amount every month. And then you have taxes, which are also based off of your income too. Depending on how much money you make a year, they require you to pay a certain amount of money to the government every 3 months or 4 months. It's 3 months, I think, every 3 months. Um, so so like in the event that you lose your job, you still have health insurance. It's just figuring out how to pay it, right? And so like if you do lose your job, they do have unemployment here that you can apply for as a citizen. Because if you have, like for example, if you were sponsored by a company, you have a visa and a residence card, so you can always apply to the unemployment office and say, hey, look, I was let go from my job or I was fired from my job and I need some type of uh what is it, stimulus until I can find another job. But um they normally won't leave you like high and dry. I don't know what the amount that you get from unemployment is because I haven't been unemployed for that
But
long.
they normally won't leave you high and dry. They usually will give you some time for you to figure it out and maybe move to the next one for the most
Yeah,
part. Because
yeah. So you can, if you have to report to the immigration office if you've been unemployed. But it's normally a decent grace period to where you're not like it's not like you get fired and then if you don't have a job they send you back. It's like they give you a grace period. I forget how long it is. I think it's like 2 months, but to find, it might be 3 months to find another job. Um, and then God willing, you find another job, and you just once you find another job, you have to report back to them. But I think that might be standard for every country
so
as a foreigner.
in your experience, I mean, how was your working situation? You always fine, and have you always been working? How many years you have been in Japan so far? And yeah, first,
I've been in.
yeah.
No, go ahead. So, so I've been in Japan for 3 years. So the first year and a half, I worked for one company, and it was kind of like I was telling you, I worked as an English teacher, and um, that's one thing I did want to mention to people who are not living here and don't know this is that if you come over here as an English teacher, a lot of times they'll tell you it's full time, but it's actually you're only getting paid for 29 and a half hours. And they do that because if they pay you 30 hours, then they have to pay for your health insurance. So they subtract 1 hour, so they don't have to pay for your health insurance. So you still have to pay, but it's just not through the company; it's through the government. And so I was doing that. I did that for about a year and a half, and uh, I'm the type of person where this is partially why I left America in the first place, is because I was working in just one job, doing the same thing every day for 8 hours. And when I got here, it was basically the same thing. I was working in one place for 8 hours a day, and only getting paid for less than 30 of them. Um, and I wasn't feeling it. I didn't like it. So I left that job and I started I started to take part-time jobs and self-sponsor my own visa so that I'm not tied to just one company. So if you do that, you have one employer act as your main employer, and you can renew your visa doing that, and then you can get more jobs, and then you can kind of make your own schedule based on how you want to work. So what that does is, for example, if one employer fires you and it's not your main employer, you still have that amount of income. And normally part-time jobs don't pay that much less than like a full-time job as an English teacher anyway. Like, so if you get like 2 or 3 part-time jobs, you can work less hours and make more money most of the time. So that's what I did. So last year I ended up working like 3 different jobs, but I was only working like maybe like 25 hours, but I was getting paid more than the teachers who work the full-time AOT position sometimes. And yeah, so you could do that. Like I said, there's always work here. It's just pretty much there's always work here, and you can find work. It's just how you want to work. Do you want to work 40 hours a week? Do you want
So
to work part-time jobs?
speaking the language a requirement. It's a must for you to get a work down there, or you can get along if you're just beginning or not understanding the language very well. Can you still navigate the area and get a job and move on if you don't speak the language, or like you must speak the language before you put the foot over there with the intention to stay?
Like to teach English? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, for example, that would be one example. Yeah.
No, you don't need to speak English to teach. You don't need to speak Japanese to speak or to teach English in Japan. Like you could come over. A lot of people do that. They come over, which, okay, so a lot of people do come over here and they don't know very much Japanese. So what I will say is, to go along with that, a lot of those people are also the same people that don't have very good experiences in Japan, if you know what I mean. So like I've known a lot of foreigners who come over here, they don't speak any English. I mean, they don't speak any Japanese. Why do I keep saying that? Um, and they get frustrated when they don't, when they first don't try and learn the language, and then they expect their interactions with Japanese people who do not speak English to change. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Like
it does make sense. Yeah, yeah, I understand what you mean.
so
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I would
So
recommend.
yeah, you would recommend to yeah, you would what would you recommend, Lawrence? Yes.
I would recommend that you don't. I'm not saying for you to be super fluent when you come over here, but it would be a good idea to familiarize with some basic Japanese and basic like cultural nuances about Japan, like from books or something like that, so that you're not over here and kind of just winging it, and you know establishing bad relationships with the people, if you're planning on staying here for a long time and you're looking to have like a really good experience in Japan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and how is it with the people? I mean, once you speak Japanese and you speak the language, etc., I've often heard that it can be a little bit, people are a little different there. So is it easy to connect with people, Japanese people, I mean, or other people in general when you're in Japan, or how is that part, that
and
relationship driven part?
and that's my second part. So the reason I say that is because, yes, in Tokyo, people are, for lack of a better word, they're pretty cold. It's a big city. People, they don't really interact with each other than like on the train, like in passing or through work. So, and that's just how that's how Japanese people are. They're a different breed. Like, they're not really raised to be super warm in the sense of like the way that we are in Western cultures. And so you have to think of Japan as like, I always kind of apply the mentality of like anything that we do in America is going to be the opposite in Japan, and that's kind of got me kind of far in Japan because it normally is like if you break down just their their mannerisms, it's the exact opposite. Like they like when we see each other, we shake each other hands, or we like hug each other and stuff like that when we see each other, like your friends or like your coworkers and stuff. Like we have physical contact. In Japan, they don't touch, they don't do any of that stuff. They bow, or like they stare at each other awkwardly, and they have these weird conversations and stuff like that
Hmm.
because
That
it's the
that
exact.
sounds, from my perspective, it sounds like a lot of fun to watch actually. So I mean,
Oh, it's hilarious. It's really funny.
it's gotta be shocking when you get there. I want to ask you another question. Mm, how it's dating and still that all relationship part with Japanese. So you kind of have to readapt, and how is that all process of readapting to their culture, to all of this bowing, and how does it make you feel, and how it's the dating scene? I mean, is it easy to date some person from Japan, or if you ever, how is that like? Is it the same as here, or?
So I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I have not dated a Japanese girl since I've been here.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry. So I've had a couple of interactions, but I've mainly only dated other foreigners while I've been here. So I would say um as far as dating goes, it's a little different. It can be a little different. They the way that they do dating is different. That's another thing. Is like they get together in groups. Like Japanese people don't like to do things outside of groups, if that makes sense. So like they have this thing called a gokon, which is basically a certain number of guys organize, or there's one organizer, and then or that person organizes a group of the same sex to go on a group date with another group of the opposite sex around the same age. That's how they mingle. It's like they have to do everything is collective or in groups. Like, so walking up and down the street and like hitting on girls is still frowned upon here. Like, people do it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but the majority of stuff here is basically done in groups. So like if you're not in the group, it's a lot harder for you to have those interactions, if that makes sense. Like, even just like friends, if you're not in their group, then you are an outsider and they don't want anything to do with you. It's kind of how it works here. Which me personally, I don't mind that because I've always been like a one man lone wolf type guy anyway. So like some people get offended by that. They say, "Oh, they don't like me" and stuff like that. But that's really just the nature of the culture. That's just how it is, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't care.
Okay, so uh, if you were to go back 3 years in time from now, would you still do it? Would you still
If
go
I
to
were to go
Japan?
what?
If you went back in history, if you have the chance to go back in history, would you still get on a plane and go to Japan, or would you have maybe chosen some other country?
No, I still would come back. I think I would come back to Japan. I wouldn't come to Tokyo though. I don't think.
Um, well, Lawrence, I thank you very much for being here on the show with me, and so really, thank you very much. Bye, Lawrence.
Thank you.